When you think about weaving, clothing, fabric, it's made up of repeating patterns and little tunes, if you like, little motifs and themes that repeat. That's the same with music. In music, we hear repeating patterns, little themes that recur. Some music requires the patterns to repeat very quickly, and other music, you have to wait quite a long time before something comes back again that you recognize. But overall, those kinds of ideas, they really structure human thought, that we latch onto things because we recognize the fact that they come back again. And it's the same with textiles. The difference there, though, however, is that with textiles, the repeating patterns are also part of the structure, of the resilience, the tensile strength of the material. The material doesn't exist without the crisscross pattern, which is what weaving is about. So those quite straightforward connections are what initially got me thinking about music and weaving. That extends also into my family history, because my mother's Greek and her upbringing was a peasant upbringing in a poor rural environment in northeast Greece. And my grandmother used to make all of the clothes, the bedding from scratch. This piece here, in fact, is one of my grandmother's pieces of fabric. It's very strong still. It's over 100 years old. It was woven from wool that she sheared from her own sheep. She washed the wool, she spun it, she turned it into yarn, put it on the loom and wove it. And that was the norm. That was what she did all the time. But she wasn't what you would call a professional weaver at all. She was a domestic. In fact, she was a peasant farmer. But as part of her everyday life, she had to make stuff to keep warm. I think this is really quite inspiring because it's also encoding a point in time. There was a specific moment in time when this piece of cotton went through and that piece of wool went through. So in a sense, this holds memory as well. And I think that's something that most people acknowledge about music as well, that our experience of music encodes our memories as well. How many times do we experience the idea of hearing a song and going, oh yes, I remember that's when something happened. But that aspect of the association between music, sound and fabric is also very important, and it's something that I'm trying to draw out in my project. The associate artist position really basically consists of 2 visits to Mull over the course of a year, 1 week each. And this allows for research and development, to connect with people, to experience the island. For me, that's involved meeting spinners and weavers. I've met some of the young people at the youth theatre. And it also, I think it's important to work on Mull as well, to actually make some of the material that I'm composing on Mull. So for example, I recorded the sound of Sarah Smith, one of Tobermory's most illustrious weavers, and she has a small weaving shed, and I recorded her weaving using her loom, and I was quite taken with the percussive quality of the loom. So I started to construct a sort of duet between Sarah's loom and a bunch of percussion instruments. And so scoring that was great fun. I did that one day at Antoba in the cafe, actually, with my headphones on, just working on the laptop. Where that's going to lead, I'm not really sure at the moment, but it's that kind of opportunity that it arises unexpectedly and you go with it. Ultimately, it will come together as a piece of some kind, probably an installation with speakers, so that there's a kind of immersive experience for people. The sounds will come from different directions. You sometimes won't be able to tell the difference between the sound of a percussive sound of a loom and a percussive sound of some drums, for instance, but other times they'll be quite distinct. Likewise, the sound of rubbing fabric, that kind of coarse rubbing sound that you will get when you record close up to a piece of fabric. Combining that with the sound of the Tobermory River, for instance, again a very coarse sound which is very similar actually to the sound of rubbing fabric, and blending those sometimes separating them out. So a range of different strategies that are in progress still, really. Some of the things I've also been doing is just reading about weaving. So different weave patterns, for example, plain weave, twill, basket weave, these all have different themes and motifs that repeat, and finding ways in which language can unlock some of the potential meanings and ideas that are associated with those patterns has fascinated me as well, which is why I've been also drawn to writing poems about what I've been doing. As the basis of a poem, I've used a little hand-woven, handmade button that Sarah Smith made, and considered how you might talk about it in words. What is it about this button? There's a little tartan pattern on the button. What is it about that button that you might say? And then what does that writing unlock for thinking about music and sound? So that's the kind of linear sort of process I've been following. Sarah's handmade button, for me, was reminiscent of the floor of a cathedral, because a lot of cathedrals have this sort of kind of crisscrossy pattern on their floors, and I thought, this is like looking down on a cathedral tiled floor from a great altitude. Little button. These are just thoughts and ideas, little whimsical ideas that occur in relation to some of the things that I've encountered on Mull. Some of them very small and modest, others on a grand scale, mountains and seascapes and roaring water and, you know, the geological features of the island, which are still actually to be explored because I'm still at a sort of midpoint in my exploration.